Back at it, yo. Back at it again. With another bomb track. So I decided that this girl needs like a knife because she literally has nothing on her. So there is a knife on the sprue. So she'll have a whip and a knife, which, again, like I said, it would be great if she could have a holstered pistol. I need to find a holstered pistol. Anyways, just testing to see if the web camera doesn't suck. I'm going to make a lot of jerky movements so that I record this sort of stuff. And then I'm going to see how that looks on playback, because before the webcam looked like shit. And how does the webcam look now? Well, who knows? We'll find out when I watch this all back. Maybe that knife. Maybe there wasn't a knife on here. Maybe I was totally dreaming when I saw that. I was dreaming when I saw that. Yeah, I thought there was like a little sheath knife. You know what? On the main Escher sprue, if I can lean over here and grab one. Oh my god, my sprues fell over, so they're all over the floor now. Alright, well, ready to hear a whole lot of noise. Alright, here's an Escher sprue. Here's an Escher sprue. There's got knives on it. There's a knife. She can have that knife. That's a good little knife for her. And then she can have a stiletto and a whip. I don't know why she'd have the stiletto. She's got the whip. When you get in close, she's gonna stab you. Poison knife. Good old Escher and their poisons. Girl shooter loved her poisons. I was reading. So I picked up a book that was it's 100 years old. Well, the copy I have was printed in 1978, but the original copy was printed in 1916, and it's called Fairy Tales from Around the World, and it's illustrated by Arthur Rackham. If you know who Arthur Rackham is, then you know how awesome that is. And so it's got fairy tales from around the world. There's like Scottish ones, Irish ones, Welsh, so Europe. But there are some like there's like three little short ones from Japan. Momotaro, as my daughter corrected my Japanese, which I thought was quite funny when I said it. She said, "No, that's not how it's said, Daddy." And I said, "Okay, well, you tell me how it's said." So there you can see, I just sort of stuck the. She's got a knife on her back, because why wouldn't she? I'm gonna try and. There we go. So it's just a girl with a knife and a whip and a collar. You know, she reads Teen Beat magazine. So yeah, so one of the stories was Sleeping Beauty, which is originally a French story. And if you think it's, I have a Disney Sleeping Beauty poster sitting right here. It's one of my favorite Disney films. I'd never read the original story before, so this was a trip for me and my kid. Because I said, well, let's just read the original Sleeping Beauty story. So we're reading it, and first thing, it's not three. There's not three good fairies. There's 7, and they all give her different gifts. And it wasn't the Maleficent. There's no Maleficent in it. It's an older fairy who wasn't invited because everyone thought she was dead. Literally, she's like, oh, they haven't come. She hasn't come out of her castle in like how many years. And so everyone thought she was either under a spell, trapped in her castle, or was dead, so they didn't invite her. And they gave these like gold boxes to all the fairies. And there were only 7 of them that the king had made, and there was an 8th fairy, and she didn't get one. The king was like, oh, we'll make sure we set a place for you, but of course they didn't have a gold box for her. So this fairy gets pissed, because she doesn't get a gold box, because she didn't get an invite, right? So all the other fairies, so one of the other fairies sees her, the old fairy, like, grumbling about it. It's like, oh, I bet she's going to try and do something nasty. So she hides so that she can be the last fairy to go and give her the baby princess her gift, and which I think is kind of like in the movie. because basically all the fairies go up and they're like, oh, I'll give her long life. I'll give her, she'll be happy all the time. She'll be the smartest one in the room. Blah blah blah. All these gifts of fairydom, right? And then the old fairy goes up and is like, yeah, you're gonna die. You're gonna prick your finger on a spindle and you're gonna die when you're an adult, or when you're close to an adult. Not, they don't specify time. Like in the movie, they're like 16th birthday. You're hitting your finger on that spindle and you're going, right? So then the other fairy comes up and goes, look, I can't stop her magic, but I can tame it a bit. So you're not going to die. You're just going to sleep for 100 years. Then the son of a king is going to come and wake you up with a kiss, whatever. Like, there's no, like, love's first kiss. But the language in it is funny because this is a translation from the original French, but it was done in 1916, so a lot of the words that they use are really flowery and French, right? But translated into English. But the funniest thing is, this is skipping ahead to when the prince does actually get to the Sleeping Beauty, and Sleeping Beauty wakes up halfway through the story. Like, the first half of the story is basically Sleeping Beauty growing up. Not even growing up. They literally go from her being a baby to her father ordering all the spinning wheels in the kingdom destroyed, to her being 15 years old and finding an old lady in one of the towers spinning yarn, and she immediately grabs the spindle and prints herself, right? Doesn't even know. Like, oh, what's this? Let me see if I can do that. And she falls asleep. And then the fairies come in and they're like, okay, well, she's asleep. She's going to be asleep for at least 100 years. Nothing we can do about that. We knew this day was coming. Tough titties, right? So they go, okay, so everyone but the king and queen that's in the castle, they go around and they tap with their fairy wands, and they tap everyone. They tap all the servants. They tap all the people working in the kitchen. They tap literally the list is like a paragraph of all the people in the castle that they tap with their wands. The ones that they don't tap are the king and queen. And they even like tap the food so that it freezes in time as well, right? It goes to sleep. They talk about how like the fire goes to sleep and how the spinning roasts go to sleep. And they say, so when the prince comes in 100 years to wake her up, all this will be here for her, right? Everyone will be here for you. Will be here for the princess when she wakes up. And they don't name her. They never name the princess. The prince doesn't even get a name. The only characters that get a name, any of the characters? Oh, they're kids. So 100 years later, the brambles and the thorns all grow up around the castle, and everyone forgets about the castle. 100 years later, Prince riding through on his horse with his entourage, and he's like, "What's going on at that castle?" And the locals are all like, "Oh, it's where all the sorcerers meet, and they have their yearly meeting, and they celebrate their sorceries." Or no, it's where there's an ogre that lives there, and he captures and eats all the children. Remember that part, because that's important, actually. You didn't think there was an ogre in Sleeping Beauty, but there is. And it's not who you think it is. So the prince is like, okay, well, whatever. And then this old man comes up and goes, no. And he tells him kind of the story about the princess. He's like, there's a princess in the castle, the most beautiful princess ever. I remember when I was a kid hearing about her. And the prince is like, well, and he says, yeah, and a son of a king is supposed to show up and go and rescue her. And so the prince is like, well, I guess that's me, right? Because he's a prince, and clearly this is him. So he walks up to the castle, and all the thorns and all the brambles spread, and he goes in, and it closes behind him, so his entourage can't follow him in. So he goes into the castle, and he sees all the servants and all the people that were at the castle all frozen in time, sleeping, and he thinks they're all dead at first. Then he's like, well, no, they've got like rosy cheeks, and for some reason, like, there's wine in their cup that is just sitting there, and it looks like fresh wine, and he can see like so he sees like basically everything's frozen in time. So he goes in and he goes upstairs, and there's the princess lying on the bed, and I don't think he kisses her. I think he just wakes her up. I think he just goes over and she's like, ah, and she wakes up, and they immediately fall in love, and there's like this whole paragraph of like really flowery conversation between them about how as soon as they looked in each other's eyes, they knew this was true love, and blah 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 blah, and on and on and on. And then and everyone else wakes up too, right? So everyone else is like, "Oh, it's supper time!" Like literally, that's like how they stop like staring into each other's eyes. Is that one of the servants is like, "Come down for supper," and so they do, and then they have this big party, and then the 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 local priest, who's obviously was frozen too, marries them that night, and then they talk about how they go back to the bedchamber and barely slept. And I thought that was funny because I was like, well, that's a nice way of saying it. Yeah, they went back to their bedchamber and they barely slept. That's all that happened. They just barely slept. But they were up all night chatting, right? And then fast forward, the prince goes home to his kingdom and doesn't tell anyone that he's married this princess that he freed from this magical spell, right? Doesn't tell anyone. He's just like, right? But his mother suspects something. Now, here's the part. Here's the twist that blew me and my daughter's mind, completely blew our minds. The prince, his mother, is an ogre. And she says, "Oh, the king only married her for her money, but she comes from a long line of ogres, and she is an ogress." And I'm like, okay, well, Sleeping Beauty has an ogre in it, and it just happens to be Prince Charming's mother. Interesting. Carry on. So we keep reading, and eventually the king, the prince's father, dies, and the prince becomes king. And then, and at that point, he's like, well, I'm king, so now I can just be like, hey, guess what? I married this girl. She's a princess from 100 years ago. And it's funny, when she wakes up, he's like, why are you dressed like my grandmother? Yeah, it actually says that in the book. Because he's like, because her clothes are so out of fashion, right? Where was I? Oh, yes. The prince's mother. So he moves the kingdom back to the other castle, because that was the historic capital of the country. And will now be the capital of the country again, is the Sleeping Beauty's castle. So he moves his kingdom there, and then he goes off to fight a war. And it's just like, it's literally like 2 lines. It's like, and the prince went to war, because that's what happened in Europe back then. You became a king. After being a king for a little while, you get bored, you make war on someone else. So he goes off to war and leaves his mother in charge, his mother, the ogress, right? And remember, his mother is an ogre, an ogress, as they call it. And they've already established that the legends of the ogres in that part are that they eat children. Another important thing. Oh yeah, I should say in the meantime, before he goes off to war, he and Aurora have 2 kids. And she's 16 when he wakes her up. Technically she's 116 because she was asleep for 100 years. If she's 16, her daughter is 4, which means that's, nature took its course at that age, and that's, and then so they had a son and a daughter first, who when the prince goes off to war is 4 years old, and a son who's 3 years old, and he names the daughter Dawn and the son Day because they're so beautiful. It says that. And then he goes off to war and leaves his mother in charge, the ogress. So what happens is that the ogress then immediately sends Sleeping Beauty and her 2 kids to some farm in the woods, to some cottage in the woods, right? And then a few days later, she goes to the cottage in the woods and basically tells the steward there, I'm eating Dawn for dinner tonight, so you better go get Dawn and prepare her for dinner tonight. And the steward is like, she's an ogress, I guess I'll say yes. So he goes to get a knife, and he can't bring himself to kill the kid. So, which we've heard this in stories before, right? In fairy tales before. I love my hair. He goes to tell the kids, goes to kill the kid, and he can't. So he goes out into the yard and kills a baby goat and serves that up. And the ogress eats it and goes, oh, this is delicious. I love baby. It's so good. And then, like, 2 days later, and he takes the kid and hides it in his in his house with his wife. So he's like, you hide this kid because I just told the ogress queen that I fed her to. Remember, this is Sleeping Beauty. A couple nights later, she's like, all right, now I'm eating Day. Bring me Day for dinner. And he's like, ugh, same thing. He already realizes that he's going to dupe her again. He's not even going to try and go kill the kid this time. So he just takes Day and takes him to be with his sister. With the steward takes him to his wife's place, and they hide them there. And does the same thing. Serves her a goat, baby goat. She eats the baby goat, thinks it's delicious. She's super happy. Then she comes back and goes, okay, now I want to eat my daughter-in-law, Sleeping Beauty. And at this point, Sleeping Beauty's 20 years old, and so the steward goes to kill her. He goes to ambush her in her room, walks into the room, and basically just immediately just tells her what he's going to do. He's like, I'm here to kill you because the queen told me to kill you. Serve you for dinner. And I guess at some point, Sleeping Beauty found out that the queen ate her 2 kids, so she's like, kill me. Just kill me, just do me. I'll go see my kids in heaven. Just kill me. And he's like, well, actually, your kids aren't in heaven. They're at my place with my wife. Come with me, and I'll figure something out. Because he's like, how am I going to convince the queen that, it's like baby goats, you can kind of make them look like little kids, right? But this is a 20-year-old grown woman. How am I going to do that? So he gets a hern, so I guess a deer, or something like that. The language in it is fantastic. So he basically cooks up a big deer and serves it as Sleeping Beauty, and the queen's like, oh, delicious, 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 right? So this goes on for a while. The king's still off at war. The king, the prince, the Sleeping Beauty's husband, the father of the children, still off at war. So they're still hiding out in the steward's house, right? The next thing is that the queen is out stomping around the castle grounds looking for, it says looking for some dainties. So basically, I guess she's just looking for kids to eat, right? Just wandering around the castle looking for kids to eat. And she hears Day's voice because he's crying. And it literally says he's crying because he was bad and his mother is going to now whip him. So even back then, kids, you could still be the good guy, but your parents will still beat your ass. I don't know. Anyways, I thought it was hilarious. So she freaks out. She's like, he lied to me, so so here's what I want. I want a giant cauldron, and she basically orders the guards to seize them, and she says, I want a giant cauldron, and you're going to fill it with toads, and you're going to fill it with asps, and you're going to fill it with vipers. And my daughter's like, what's a viper? I'm like, a snake. She's like, what's an asp? I'm like, a snake. And all kinds of other reptiles. A big cauldron. And she's going to take the family, so the Sleeping Beauty, her 2 kids, Dawn and Day, and the steward, who also has a name, and that's right, the steward has a name. It's Simon. So those are the only 3 characters with actual names. Everyone else is queen, princess, prince, king, whatever, right? So the 2 kids and the steward have names. I guess they're the important ones. And the steward and his family and his assistant, who never gets mentioned until that point. All of a sudden, his assistant is now in shit, right? And orders them all bound, and she's gonna have the guards kill them and drop them into the giant cauldron of toads, vipers, asps, and all other kinds of reptiles. And she's an ogre. Whatever. And just as about to do this, the king shows up, right? Sleeping Beauty's husband shows up and is like, what the hell is going on here? His mother sees him, and she jumps into the cauldron and immediately gets eaten by all the toads, asps, vipers, and all other kinds of reptiles. And the story pretty much ends at that point. And that's it. That is Sleeping Beauty, the translator from the original French version of the story, which who knows where that originally came from, because it's probably just a folktale that's been told over and over and over. But I thought it was hilarious, and I thought I'd share that with you guys. So that's not much going on down here on Le Table, but a fun story nonetheless. Anyways, I'm going to kill the stream because I want to look at this and see how it sounds. Alright, that was end of the test.